This study is part of a team research program on feminization of agriculture. It's a collaborative research with my colleague Ruth Meisendijk at IFPRI, Prachanda Pradhan, who established the Farmer Managed Irrigation System Promotion Trust, or FMIST, in Nepal, as well as Monita Roth, Diana Sudadima, and Deepa Joshi from IMI. Nepal has a long history of irrigation, including not only government-built and managed systems, but also widespread presence of farmer-managed irrigation systems. These are sophisticated traditional systems, often bringing water for kilometers in hill and mountain areas. Sophisticated governance arrangements, including the organizational infrastructure of water users associations, WUAs, made that possible, mostly mobilizing lots of labor, allocating water shares in proportion to labor contributions. Widespread male migration from rural areas is a major force shaping agrarian transformation in Nepal. This includes international migration to the Gulf countries, Malaysia, and India, and migration within Nepal. Male migration has important effects on many facets of the physical, social, and institutional landscape. One particularly important area affected is the governance and management of local public goods, especially irrigation systems. This raises important questions about how irrigation systems are managed and what consequences this has for the performance of irrigation systems. To assess how male migration may affect irrigation system performance, it's important to consider the major aspects of farmers' roles in the irrigation systems and the key contributions that allow the system to deliver water to the fields. Most prominent among these are the labor, cash, and in-kind contributions for construction or maintenance of systems, which represent a substantial investment by farmers, especially in farmer-managed irrigation systems. Less obvious, but still very important, contributions are the knowledge and decision-making in governance, which keep the system functioning. How the changes in governance, contributions, and technology affect irrigation system performance are likely to depend on the extent of technical and institutional change at the system level, as well as the agency and strategic behavior of women and men, both migrants and those who remain. While government regulations have been introduced to improve gender-balanced participation, gender norms, as well as time and capacity constraints, may prevent female members from performing essential functions in the WUAs. Women may also strategically use the absence of men to avoid responsibilities in irrigation. However, remittances, transfer of land and water rights to women, and new technology and transport options can create different conditions for men's and women's participation in irrigation. Irrigation system performance, in turn, affects agricultural productivity. These broader linkages with agricultural productivity are beyond the scope of this study, which focuses on the effects of male migration on irrigation system performance. We examine four sets of research questions. On institutional change, what changes in formal rules of WUAs and in gender norms have been observed? How are these related to male migration? On women's roles, how do male migration and these institutional changes relate to women's participation? Do women take on membership and leadership roles? Do women meet labor contributions through hiring labor or contributing female labor, or not at all? On technological change, what technologies are in use? How do these change demands for male and female labor? How are these related to male migration? On outcomes, what consequences for effectiveness of irrigation systems and collective action are observed? Does the adaptation result in more inclusive decision-making in irrigation system management? To address these questions, we present findings from a mixed method study, including a phone survey of 336 WUA leaders from all 7 provinces implemented during June to July 2019. This is complemented by a qualitative study of 10 irrigation systems conducted by Dr. Padang of IFPRI, who has been studying many of these systems for decades. The 10 irrigation systems spread in the hills and Terai regions were originally interviewed by IFPRI during 2014 to 2015 as part of a serial systems initiative for South Asia study, and then revisited in the current study in 2019. Notes from the focus group discussions were then written up in English, including key quotations, following the broad outline of a checklist, and reviewed by the authors. We draw upon these notes in conjunction with the results of the quantitative analysis of the phone survey. We also draw insights from 2 deep dive sites with contrasting experiences of male migration and WUA responses. They were part of the 10-site case study and were visited a second time in the current study for further exploration of system dynamics. The key interest variable for the quantitative analysis is male migration, which is a binary variable for whether or not there is presence of male out-migration in the system. The control variables include irrigation system management, system size, type, topography, and whether executive community members are from high caste, as well as respondents' education level. We see a significant effect of male migration on women's participation in meetings, and the switch from labor contribution to both cash and labor, or contracting out the maintenance. Often there's a combination. Even if they contract out the maintenance of the headworks, there's need for some emergency repairs or cleaning of canals. Overall, women's participation in WUA meetings have increased dramatically. 98% of WUAs interviewed noted an increase in female WUA members attending meetings between now, the time of the survey, and 10 years ago. And nearly 99% of WUA leaders noted an increase in female members speaking in meetings. Tobit regression analysis further shows that, as compared to systems where there was no male out-migration, women's participation is significantly higher, both in terms of attendance and speaking up, but not significant for maintenance of canals. While higher participation of women in maintenance, operation, water allocation, and distribution was reported, the regression analysis shows that migration does have a significant effect on women participating in supervising. In terms of technological change, regression analysis found that male migration was associated with women's adoption of harvesters and threshers, but not weeders. At the end of the interview, we asked what overall changes respondents had noted. The ones that are marked in red are things that we would see as potential negative outcomes, while the others can be considered as adaptive responses. The good news is that the negative outcomes at the system level are fairly low, and most are not significantly associated with male migration. Reported labor shortages at the household level are, however, significantly associated with migration, based on regression analysis not reported here, reflecting the many responsibilities that remaining household members, particularly women, take on. Uncultivated land is reported in approximately 16% of the systems, but is not significantly associated with migration, though it is significantly higher in hill and gravity irrigation systems. The case studies confirm that in cases of labor shortages, smallholders rent out their land or find sharecroppers rather than letting the land uncultivated. In cases like Janakalian, where migrant labor from a neighboring district is available, women from large land-owning households take on a management role and hire laborers for cultivation to keep the land in production. Overall, the relatively low reporting of deteriorating systems or uncultivated land indicate that systems are adapting to prevent these negative outcomes. The 2003 Nepal irrigation policy urges the need to formally recognize and promote women representation, with at least 33% of women in water user associations. But we found that the quotas for women's membership and leadership are not always met in practice and do not necessarily translate into active participation in WUA decision-making or activities. Family ties, kinship, and local political leadership sometimes determine women's appointment in WUA executive committees. The case studies also show that women are not always interested to participate in WUAs. Women have many responsibilities, which tend to increase when men are absent. Thus, finding time to go to WUA meetings is difficult. Many women hesitate to speak in the presence of men, either because of social norms or because they feel they don't necessarily have enough knowledge. Thus, they may rely on male relatives or other informal channels, such as male relatives, as their link to the WUAs. This is particularly the case in places like Janakalian, where water is relatively abundant and women feel confident of getting water, even if they do not participate in the WUA. But in other sites, women have pushed for greater voice in the WUAs. This may be associated with the influence of other organizations raising women's confidence in participating in meetings, or a greater perceived dependence on WUAs meeting their irrigation needs, as in the case of Kolleritar. Similarly, the choice of mechanisms for system maintenance varies depending on men's and women's preferences, system infrastructure, as well as local labor markets. In Janakalian, women with reliable remittances preferred to give cash contributions, and the availability of labor crews from neighboring villages made it possible to hire labor for system maintenance. Whereas in Kolleritar, women lobbied the WUA to be allowed to contribute their own labor, instead of allowing only male labor or paying a fine for not sending a man. Even within a system, women from wealthier families may prefer to use remittances to hire laborers to meet WUA labor contributions, while poor families have trouble hiring labor. Where it has been possible for systems to hire equipment and contract out some of the maintenance, it reduces labor requirements for both men and women and facilitates the monetization of maintenance contributions. The phone survey results show a correlation between male migration and contracting for system maintenance. In-depth interviews with WUA members in Janakalian confirmed that they did this in response to labor shortages that they associated with male migration. Our overall findings show a range of responses to migration. Sites with substantial male migration are more likely to have adapted WUA rules to allow for women's participation and to monetize the contributions for maintenance or even contract out some of the major maintenance work. Women's participation and speaking in meetings is also higher in sites where with male migration. A relatively high proportion of all systems report women being involved in the various irrigation roles of system operation, maintenance, water allocation, and distribution, but those with male migration are significantly more likely to report women also being involved in supervising roles. The qualitative work shows that women exercise agency in whether and how to interact with WUAs. While there are some cases where women seek to change WUA rules, in other cases they do not feel it is worthwhile to engage, and they prefer indirect interaction, such as via male relatives or giving monetary contributions, rather than participating in the meetings or maintenance activities. Migration is also associated with mechanization of harvesting and threshing. These are time-critical tasks usually associated with male labor, although the ability to mechanize is limited by hilly terrain and small farm sizes. Overall, systems seem to be adapting to male migration, with relatively low reported cases of land being left idle or labor shortages causing deterioration of the systems, though there are concerns with the high levels of women's labor burdens in households. Agrarian transformation is a complex process. Migration is only part of the story. Government programs such as quotas for women's participation in WUAs have also had a profound effect, even if they are not always followed. Likewise, the development of transportation, including roads and bicycles, have increased women's mobility and ability to take on greater roles in the irrigation system. Mobile phones have made it easier for women to coordinate hiring of laborers on the farm and the irrigation maintenance, and also allow migrant men to continue to be involved in decision making. Mechanization has not only reduced the male labor required for particular tasks like plowing and harvesting, but also women's labor for tending bullocks throughout the year. While the phone survey of WUA leaders was a more cost-effective means to reach a large number of sites compared to face-to-face fieldwork, particularly sites that are remote or in less accessible terrains, the phone survey does have some methodological drawbacks. The primary limitation is that phone survey cannot be as detailed as face-to-face interviews. Thus, we have tried to stick to basic facts and opinions of the informants, but there may be some blurs between the two. The other drawback is that it's not always clear how the questions were heard and interpreted by the respondents. Future research is needed to further unpack women's views in relation to their envisioned roles in irrigation system management following male migration, and how the latter are linked with WUA's organizational characteristics and historical origins. Research that dives into the heterogeneity of women farmers, WUA members, is critically needed to better identify gendered responses to adapt to the changing rural sector and its implications for women empowerment within WAs and beyond. Thank you very much for your attention.